Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. So, my friends, there was recently a clip that went viral, or at least went semi-viral, featuring Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. And for simplicity's sake, and to preempt the trolls, I'm only going to refer to him throughout the course of this video as Mayor Pete, even though he's no longer a mayor because it's a much easier name to pronounce. But Mayor Pete appeared on Fox News Sunday, the show called Fox News Sunday, and he gave what many on the left side of the political spectrum considered to be a rousing defense of leftist protesters' actions towards Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh at a restaurant he happened to be dining at. Many of you may remember in recent days, Brett Kavanaugh, after the Roe v. Wade Dobbs decision was made, was sitting down and enjoying dinner at a restaurant, and he happened to be assailed by a crowd of leftist protesters. And those protesters made it so that he could not exit the building out the front door, so he had to actually go through the back door, and he got mocked and derided by people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and other leftists because he allegedly did not hear or see any of the protesters, but he had to skip out on dessert. So they said, "Oh well, he had to skip out on dessert. Boo-hoo." And so Mayor Pete provided somewhat of a more refined response, but one that I found incredibly troubling. And as I watched the response he gave, I thought to myself, you know, perhaps this is a case study on how politicians manipulate words, terms, values, and the relationship between words to give us false ideals. Perhaps this is a brilliant metaphor by which to make this video to explain. This is not just Mayor Pete we're seeing doing this, but this is the normative state of political discourse, and there are many people under spells, under incantations that are weaved and cast by politicians on all sides of the political aisle, which tickle their ears, but don't actually engage them with the truth. And so, before I get into analyzing the parts of this clip that I found particularly disturbing, allow me to give you guys a barometer by which to measure the words of any speaker, whether they're a politician, whether they're an athlete, whether they're a coach, whether they're a spokesperson for an organization, regardless of who they are. And this barometer is a few thousand years old, but I think that it has quite a bit of value. And in fact, I believe that if the modern world embraced some of the ancient world's ways still, with the trappings of the modern world, of course, a lot of issues that we have could be answered in a way that does not lead to destruction or deconstruction, which unfortunately is the siren song of our age. But this barometer comes from Cicero, or rather I should probably say yardstick, barometer, yardstick, whatever you want to use. It comes from Cicero, the ancient Roman author and speaker and philosopher. And so Cicero had two works that are oftentimes read as complementary texts, the Brutus and the Orator. Now, the Orator, which is the text I'm going to draw from for my yardstick here, is a text that is distinct from Cicero's other text called De Oratori. I believe that's how you pronounce it. I'm not too good at Latin, unfortunately, but it's distinct from that. And it's often read as Cicero's guidebook on how to be a good orator, what good orators need. And one of the observations that Cicero makes in this book is that good orators, good speakers, they have to have philosophy. Without philosophy, Cicero argues, these orators, these speakers cannot see through fallacious reasoning. They cannot divvy out the peculiarities of the truth, particulars of the truth. They cannot understand issues within the broader scope of things holistically. They don't have the tools to actually interact with knowledge. Allow me to read some here with Cicero. He says, "We may therefore consider it a capital maxim, the truth of which will be more widely understood in the sequel, that the eloquent speaker we are inquiring after cannot be formed without the assistance of philosophy." I do not mean that this alone is sufficient, but only that it is sometimes necessary. And he goes on, he kind of jumps down here, and he mentions several examples of this. He says, that without philosophy, no man can speak fully and copiously upon a variety of important subjects which come under the notice of an orator. Accordingly, in the Phaedrus of Plato, it is observed by Socrates that the great Pericles excelled all the speakers of his time because he had been an heir of an Anaxagoras, the naturalist, from whom he supposes that he not only borrowed many excellent and sublime ideas, but a certain richness and fertility of language. It is this richness and fertility of language that Cicero argues makes the good speaker. So, with this all in mind, let us now analyze Mayor Pete's Fox News appearance. Let us do so faithfully, and let us do so in a way that will hopefully explain some of the tactics he is using. Let us go to the first part here. Let's play this.
Your husband tweeted after Justice Brett Kavanaugh left a Washington restaurant due to protesters. The tweet reads, "Sounds like he just wanted some privacy to make his own dining decisions." Is that appropriate, sir?
Look, when public officials go into public life, we should expect two things. One, you should always be free from violence, harassment, and intimidation. And two, you're never going to be free from criticism or peaceful protest, people exercising their First Amendment rights. Okay. And that's what happened in this case.
Okay, you noticed he was asked a very particular question. He was asked, is this okay? Is this appropriate? And he mentioned two things that are quite interesting. He said, well, every public figure has the right to be free from harassment and intimidation. But they don't have the right, they never have the right to be free from peaceful protest and criticism. Isn't that interesting? Now, I want you guys to hone in on a word that Mayor Pete uses, the word peaceful. And I'm not trying to be a semantic person here, but to understand how words are, what they mean, and which contrasts with how they're used sometimes, you have to understand the root of a word. So, when you consider the idea of a peaceful protest, most of us would say, oh, of course, we like peaceful protest. We enjoy peaceful protests. They are a hallmark of our republic. And therefore, if someone is being protested peacefully, that must be legitimate. But it's interesting because the question is never asked. Number one, can someone be harassed in a peaceful fashion? If there are people, because most times people associate peace with a lack of violence. When they say peaceful protest, a lot of times they mean please don't be violent. So, someone would say, yes, if someone's just outside of a building screaming at you, screeching at you, they may be being a little bit rowdy, but they're not being unpeaceful towards you, not being violent towards you. And this is the association made by a lot of people. But the interesting thing is, peace has not very little to do with violence in its entirety. Peace has more to do with conflict. And conflict can either be violent or non-violent. So the word peace comes from two words. The old Anglo-French word, pays, and then the French word, which is essentially the same thing, the old French word, kind of says the same thing. And from those two words comes the word peace. And after the word was put together throughout the years, it eventually came to mean the absence of conflict or freedom from conflict, freedom from strife, things of that sort. That is peace properly understood, freedom from conflict. And it is very clear what those protesters did to Brett Kavanaugh was quite in the spirit of conflict. But this is the problem. Mayor Pete is not betting on you to know what peace actually means. He's betting on you to use proximity ethics, associating an idea with what it is near, not what it actually is, to draw a conclusion. And the more people do this, the further away they get from the truth. But politicians do this stuff every single day. So you have to ask yourself a question. Can someone be harassed in a peaceful fashion? Of course they cannot be, if peace indeed means, as per its etymology, freedom from conflict, freedom from strife. They cannot be peacefully harassed. They cannot be peacefully heckled continuously. Perhaps someone can scream at you and then walk away, but they cannot. There are certain limitations that the word peace cannot cover for. Now, whether this should be against the law or whatever, that's an entirely different circumstance. I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm talking about in terms of definitions. What does it mean to have a peaceful protest? It doesn't simply mean not being violent. It means not intentionally giving someone strife through your words and actions. It's very simple, but unfortunately it goes lost on the minds of many people. But let's go on. He mentioned something else that's quite interesting. Go.
And these protesters are upset because a right, an important right, that the majority of Americans support was taken away. Understood. Not only the right to choose, by the way, but this justice was part of the process of stripping away the right to privacy. As long as I've been alive, settled case law in the United States has been that the Constitution protected a right to privacy, and that has now been thrown out the window by justices, including Justice Kavanaugh, who, as I recall, swore up and down in front of God and everyone, including the United States Congress, that they were going to leave settled case law alone. So yes, people are upset. They're going to exercise their First Amendment rights. And as long as that's peaceful, that's protected.
Okay, so he tries to justify the quote-unquote peaceful protest. We explained why that was nonsense. Justify that by saying that protesters were justifiably mad because a right, an important right, quote, was taken away from them. Then he goes on to say, well, as long as I've been alive, the Supreme Court protected the right to privacy. Now, Mayor Pete's a young guy in his 30s, so he's been alive for probably more than the duration of Roe v. Wade was alive, where they asserted the so-called right to privacy. But he's doing it again. He's not actually telling you about the meaning or roots of words. He is betting on you understanding what rights mean in terms of what they are termed and spoken in the manner they're spoken of in the popular discourse. He doesn't actually make a case that there is a right in the Constitution to have an abortion, which, by the way, there is no legal right in the Constitution to have an abortion. This is well established. And this is one of the reasons why Roe, even liberal advocates of Roe, said it had faulty legal status. But not only that, not only is there no right in the Constitution to have an abortion, there is no right in nature to have an abortion. And nature is from whence all rights, all legitimate rights, derive from. Because we understand, if we understand the core word that forms the notion of rights, ius, which simply meant something that belongs to you, something that cannot be taken away from you, as it was developed in between the period between Francisco Suarez, a Spanish philosopher, and Grotius, a Dutch philosopher, who inspired John Locke, who consequently inspired the birth of the American Republic. If we take what their work of the word rights, which became our understanding of the word rights meant, it simply meant things that belong to you, that are inseparable from your condition as a human being, that society and the government have a moral imperative not to infringe upon. Abortion is a service. Even if you support abortion, how can a service that someone else has to produce from their own labor be a right to you? You don't have a right to someone else's moral qualities. You only have a right for your moral qualities not to be interfered with. But again, Mayor Pete is not expecting you to take a nuanced idea of this. He wants to use the term right as a trigger word to trigger some kind of emotion within you or within the viewer to make it seem as if he's standing on morally righteous ground when in fact he is not. Now, we have to go further though, because he said something else that is quite interesting. So let's go.
Compare that, for example, to the reality that as a country, right now, we're reckoning with the fact that a mob summoned by the former president
All right, well, let me follow up, Mr. Secretary.
attacked the United States Capitol for the purpose of overthrowing the election and very nearly succeeded in preventing the peaceful transfer of power. But I think common sense can tell the difference.
So again, everyone has the First Amendment right to peacefully protest, but then immediately he goes over to January 6th. Now, this is what we call a red herring, and a non sequitur as well. A red herring in the sense that it is a complete and utter distraction and a complete and utter unrelated topic. January 6th and the protest in front of Brett Kavanaugh's dining place are two separate issues. One was a political rally that had been planned for a very long time that has all kind of media narratives, interpretations about it. And the other was a gathering of disaffected activists who believe that Kavanaugh is someone who is a threat to their lives, their worldview. There is no similarity between the two other than the fact that they both happen to be instances of conflict. Once again, Pete Buttigieg, or I said his name wrong, Mayor Pete is expecting you to use proximity ethics to associate certain ideas with other ideas and then judge them in that light, as opposed to actually understanding ideas in themselves. If you live your life only understanding ideas in relation to other ideas and you never evaluate the idea for itself, do you know what that means? Do you know what that does? That completely obscures and destroys your understanding of reality, people. But again, when your understanding of reality is destroyed, then he and people like him actually get an opportunity to push their agenda. This is what it's about. Not only did he not stick faithfully to the true meaning of the word right, not only did he completely and utterly disregard Cicero's urgings that orators speak with philosophies that can adhere to the truth, not only did he completely and utterly give a complete and utter red herring to the situation, he is repeatedly doing this for rhetorical and political effect. One last thing. After all of this, he circles back and he also says, he repeats point 1 and point 2, that all officials should be free from harassment and intimidation, but they shouldn't be free from peaceful protest. So he's reasserting the point to get the viewer's mind fixated, to get that burnt into the viewer's mind. So my friends, what's the point of all of this? The point of all of this is very simple. We have to be willing, as Americans, as inheritors of a republic that is built upon objective reality, that is built upon principles that no one can amend, we have to be willing to watch ourselves very carefully when a politician or a speaker, even me, when anyone is talking to you, you must be willing to watch yourself. The moment you are not willing to watch yourself is the moment you can fall prey to wolves. Wolves that have no interest in your epistemic well-being, wolves that have no interest in actually guiding you to the truth, wolves that want to devour you for their own sustenance so they can go ahead and continue to devour until there's nothing left. I'm being a little bit macabre here, but it's to prove a point. And the point is this, my friends. When you understand first principles, when you understand definitions and etymology, when you understand all the necessary tools you need to interact with reality, no politician, no tyrant can capture your thoughts or manipulate them. You will be sovereign in your understanding, and the more people are sovereign in their understanding, the better a society we're going to have, the better government system we're going to have, and a more freer future we shall have as well. Die Gedanken sind frei. That is my motto. Die Gedanken sind frei. For all of you Germans out there, you know what that means. If not, look it up. All right, my friends, thank you so much for watching. I love you guys so much. If you love me, please go to my Patreon, patreon.com/officialcwatson, or PayPal, officialcwatson@gmail.com. Please go to my Discord, which is in the comment section down below. Be sure to like this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel, comment on this video. My friends, I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.